Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I want to talk a little bit more about Varus, his lore update, and the controversy surrounding it. Now, I did write an article yesterday kind of touching on the topic, but I wanted to go more in depth on it today, so even if you did read that article, you should go ahead and listen to this video as well, as I will be going a little bit more in depth into the issue. Now, Varus, if you are not aware, underwent a relatively drastic lore update as of yesterday. So Varus now, his backstory has changed. Beforehand, he was an Ionian archer who was set to defend this basically pit of corruption called the Pit of Pallas in an Ionian village. Noxus came to call during the Noxus-Ionian War, and Varus had to choose between abandoning the temple to go down and defend his village, where his wife and child lived, or to stay up top and defend the Pit of Pallas. He chose to stay and defend the pit. He killed a bunch of Noxians who tried to take it from him, but his entire village was destroyed and his family were killed. Because he regretted the decision, he went to the pit, he basically took on its corrupting influence, and now he is a being of vengeance. All he wants to do is kill Noxians and an attempt to avenge his family. That was Varus' old lore. His new lore is Varus is now a Darkin. He is a Darkin bow. He was trapped inside his bow. And then, basically, he has somehow, through a lot of magical shenanigans, been fused together with a pair of Ionian hunters named Valmar and Kai. Now, these two, one of them was grievously wounded during a Noxian attack, and the other, out of love for his partner, realized he couldn't save him, but maybe the magic in the pit could, so he dragged his partner in. They both were essentially destroyed and remade into Varus' new body, but their souls and their minds are still intact within Varus, and they have some degree of control over the conglomeration. Varus is both the name of the bow and the Darkin, and of the entire being as a whole. Now, this is all well and fine to me personally. I didn't have any issue with it, but a lot of people were essentially saying that the old Varus that we knew is dead, that he no longer exists, that his story has been ruined, and that a lot of the events of his new lore don't really work or aren't the exact same as they were before. And I don't really agree with that, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here. Old Varus, first, his lore did have some issues. First, his wife and child didn't really come into play at all. Maybe if you happen to be one of the very few who read his Judgment, you would know a little bit more about them. But as it was, most league players didn't even know much about them other than that they died. The other issue with it is that Varus' story was essentially complete. We knew he was this aspect of vengeance now, and he was going to kill Noxians. That was effectively it. He doesn't have any path to redemption. He doesn't have any way of combating it because this is what Varus himself wanted. The only way to go from Varus' story from there was to just have him walk around killing more Noxians. There wasn't really any way to take the story or for Riot to improve upon it in any way because it was essentially told. New Varus' lore keeps a lot of the same issues intact, essentially what would you do for a loved one, but it ups the ante by having the loved one still alive. Instead of being a case of what will you do to avenge them, it's what will you do to save them. And that, I think, is a much more gripping, emotional story to me personally, though I understand not everyone agrees with this. The other thing I kind of wanted to touch on is that because Valmar and Kai are still essentially conscious in Varus' form, it gives the story a little bit more weight because Varus, the Darkin, isn't in full control of the form. He can be contested by the other two, and the other two can assume control for brief periods of time, as we saw in his comic Heartlight. So, because of this, Varus has a little bit more going on with him. He's a Darkin now, so he's tied into the whole Darkin story, as opposed to being a random pit of corruption that no one really knows why it's there. We have Valmar and Kai who are trying to stop this demon from essentially murdering everybody they ever knew and loved. And there's a possibility that they could eventually overcome the Darkin and either destroy it or assume control of the form entirely. That's a lot more interesting to me personally than a guy who's consumed with vengeance, because that Varus' story is done. There's nothing more to develop in it, whereas this new story does have something to go along with it. The other thing is, a lot of people are saying it's similar to Cain and Rost in that you have Darkin versus human, but this is way different. In Kain versus Ross, they're essentially equals. Kain went into picking up the scythe knowing that it was a Darkin, knowing that it would try to corrupt him, and he resists it, every single waking moment. He knows what's going on, and he's deliberately trying to stop Ross. He hasn't fallen yet. It's a possibility, but he could also very easily defeat Ross and claim the scythe for himself. That's a total option. In this other scenario, though, Kai and Valimar essentially don't exist anymore. They are part of this being. Varus is basically one. So they do have some influence, and they could effectively destroy him at some point, but there's no timeline where those two are able to essentially regain their lives as they were. Their only hope is that they can basically take down Varus and end their own existence at the same time. And they didn't know what was going on. This wasn't a situation of they knew what the magic in the pit was going to do. Valimar took a shot in the dark. He didn't know what was going to happen. All he knew is maybe this will save Kai, and it did to a certain extent. And honestly, that's what kind of makes it a little more tragic in my book. But that's just my personal opinion on it. I don't feel like this retcon substantially changed who Varus was as a character. I don't think it really affected the primary note of his story, which was the tragedy, a person having to make a difficult choice and eventually being corrupted because of it, and now has to live with this corruption. I think all that is still intact in the new storyline. So, to me personally, I think what I would say is, if you dislike the new Varus lore, you are allowed to have that opinion, man. 100%. Don't let me tell you to not think it's bad. What I'm saying is there are ways to think about this that maybe you haven't considered that make it a little bit closer to Varus's original lore and make it a little bit easier to understand maybe and a little bit easier to swallow, I think. And I would definitely tone back a little bit on the hate for the writers who did the retcon. I think that they made a good choice in tying Varus into a greater narrative and giving him a better backstory to work with for future stories. So I don't know that it's necessary to be calling for these guys to resign or to be calling for no more retcons ever. I think this one was totally justified. But that's just my opinion. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think of the Varus retcon down in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you guys, especially those of you who are disappointed. Please let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear why exactly it disappoints you and what you would maybe want to see Riot do in the future for Varus. If you enjoy the video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoy the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, grabthelantern.tumblr.com. I upload an article just about each and every single day for your enjoyment. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.